Oh, coming into this qualifying session, Checo's been having to basically swat away the media. Now everyone's talking about, oh, are Red Bull sabotaging his car? Well, no, they're not. I mean, Red Bull, they may be a little bit cheeky, but they're certainly no Andrea Moda of the sport. But at least he actually made it into Q2, so here's my rundown about what's happened throughout all of the qualifying sessions. So let's kick off with Q1, and my goodness, this hard tyre session, this was actually kind of good. It was really interesting. Nobody had any idea about who was actually going to end up where. For a minute, we actually thought that Leclerc wasn't going to be making it in. Then some of the other big teams. And then one thing you might need to know is that Daniel Ricciardo did make it through, but by only 1/100th of a second from Yuki Tsunoda. We had Albon, Tsunoda, Magnussen and Sargent out, but the biggest scalp out of all of this was down to George Russell. He qualified 18th. And he was not a happy bunny about it whatsoever, down to the fact that what Mercedes was trying to do after what Tsunoda and Ricciardo established is that if you go out with a new hard set of tyres, then you might have a good chance at getting a better time rather than you just staying out for a long time and then seeing what happens. But they did go a little bit too soon. I think if they just waited a few more minutes, they might have caught other people napping. We might have had even bigger scalps, but the Mercedes plan about going out at the last minute was not that great because they ran into a lot of traffic in this session and it caused a lot of upsets, and Hamilton was very lucky to get into Q2. But George Russell, big scalp, mainly for the fact that Mercedes just didn't get the strategy right. But I think this was a really, really good idea. The hard tyres, they take a while to heat up. And we also then had the biggest problem of track limits. We had both Williams being subjected to it. We had Lando and Piastri become subject to it. We all thought that Austria was going to be the biggest issue when it came to track limits, but oh, no. Turns 5, turns 11 and 12 are going to be some very major factors when it comes to the overall idea of track limits. It was just a lot more unpredictable than I thought it would be. But Max Verstappen, them lot, they weren't all that great in Q1, and the Alfa Romeos are now actually not too bad at all. They seem to be really good in the slow corners. Zhou Guanyu topping Q1, but let's now get into Q2. Things were looking really interesting, to the point where my boy Lando was actually the fastest in that session, but most importantly, didn't feel the need to go out for another set of medium tyres, and same went for Max, who had a lap time deleted, so it looked really, really tense there. So as a result, the Red Bull gang, they went out earlier, put both cars out, and therefore they didn't have any traffic, so it all worked out fine. Max got in, and Checo got into Q3. Both Alpines didn't make it into Q3, despite them actually looking really good in terms of their race pace in the practice sessions. That was a really surprising thing to have actually come out of all of this. And then most importantly, Carlos Sainz did not make it into Q3, and it was Charles Leclerc the one to do it. In fact, for a brief second there, it looked like both Ferraris weren't going to make it into Q3. And we then have Bottas, of all people, in the top 5. How about that, eh? Oscar Piastri, 5th in Q2. I know all of these results don't actually matter because it doesn't count towards the grid. Got both Alfa Romeos here, and for the longest time, that team has really been nowhere. They've been consistent losers in my book. And Alonso, he barely made it. I mean, I've got this right up here, and I'm just looking at it, and my goodness, Hulkenberg Q3 once again, and he's now actually about to get a renewal on his contract most likely, whereas Gunther's been a bit quiet about Kevin Magnussen, so much for that Viking comeback then. But the whole ambiguity with Ferrari has just continued to expand and expand. No one really is quite sure who's going to be the second fastest team right now. And I think even McLaren's not quite sure about what they're going to be, because they were actually talking everybody down. And they're actually making me think, are they the new sandbaggers of the Formula One grid? Are they the new Mercedes in that regard? Because they're just going, oh, no, don't expect anything. We had to delay our upgrade, and oh, yeah, we might do okay, I suppose. 4th fastest if we're lucky. Well, mate, Lando, fastest in Q2, doesn't really have to use another set of mediums, and it's quite clear that in practice we saw that they were really fast on the medium tyres. This is going to be very good for the race, folks. I actually think Lando could get that podium, as I predicted. But as we saw, Daniel Ricciardo made it to 13th place. And I think that might just not be quite enough to stymie some of the media attention. I think if he got 11th or 12th or made it into Q3, people would have universally been happy and rated what he did in Q3. But that 13th place, ooh, I'm not quite sure about that. But either way, he did out-qualify Yuki, but it was not by much. So I'm a little bit dubious. I'm kind of wanting to see how the race pans out here. But he did seem to look a bit more composed. He seems to be almost there in terms of being back on the actual performance barrier that he wants to be at. But, you know, Lewis Hamilton's back up there, and he was actually quicker than Max. But then again, Max did have to just put in a banker. He was very, very wide in Sector 3. So, yes, let's move on to Q3. What an upset! We got Lewis Hamilton beating Max Verstappen by 0.003 of a second. Now, okay, I know I'm British, but this is the first time that Lewis Hamilton has actually had pole in a very long time. And you know what this means, folks. Lewis Hamilton ahead of Max Verstappen on the grid. This could lead to a very big battle into turn 1, and I would not be surprised if there's a little bit of contact, because Lewis is going to be holding on to that entirely through the first lap, and I wouldn't be surprised if Lewis starts on those soft tyres, because that Mercedes car is very good on its softs, and they've been talking it up throughout the entire weekend that you watch that Mercedes on that soft tyre, it's going to be magical around this circuit. And I think that Max has really got to be matching on soft tyres as well. He can't go on a medium tyre and just coast, because he knows Lewis, it's absolutely going to be fire. And then on top of all of that, if they do make contact, there's a McLaren second row. I'm not going to be putting on the bubble hat here because I don't need to. They were 3rd and 4th objectively. And then you got Oscar Piastri getting 4th place. Lando getting 3rd place as I thought he would. That is absolutely brilliant. You got both Alfa Romeos in the top 10, but you also got to think, Checo got to Q3, right? But he's only 9th. He's only 9th place. So even then, is that really such a good thing? Because you're in the top tier shootout, and you really didn't perform. The gap between 4th and 9th was only a 10th. They're so finite that Checo really needs to get his groove. I mean, okay, he's got over the first barrier of being in Q3. Okay, you made it to the top 10. But if you're gonna be in the top 10, in the fastest car, then you gotta be at least in the top half of that, tier. Now you're only in the bottom half. You nearly had Nico Hülkenberg beating you. So almost really, is it kind of worse to be in Q3 and really not figuring in the top 5 fight at all? And also, it's got to be really good for Zhou Guanyu here, because he outqualified a Ferrari. The customer team to Ferrari outpaced the actual Ferrari. That is kind of strange. I don't think this is going to be a good race for Ferrari, because even though that Leclerc did get 6th place, Carlos was eliminated. You know what? I think this is actually a really interesting format. I want to see this again before I make final judgment. I know that some people are going to be saying, oh, well, it's artificially controlling what the races are going to be. Well, it just goes to show that you've got to be really careful on your tyre selection. You've got to be very careful how you use them in the practice sessions. And you've just got to build a car that can turn on all the tyres in terms of tyre degradation. You've really got to have that. You've got to have a good car that can work in all sorts of environments. So I don't think even McLaren were aware about what could exactly happen in terms of their setup. Second row. And this is a place where overtaking is going to be very, very difficult. And the person behind Piastri is Zhou Guanyu. We don't know how well the Alfa Romeo is going to be in the race, because they do tend to become anonymous in the race. So I think that the McLarens might be sitting pretty in 3rd and 4th, but a podium at the very least. If Hamilton and Verstappen take each other out, which is very, very likely, because this is Hamilton's favourite track, or one of them, and Verstappen's got a very mighty car, but not quite as mighty as we all thought. They are definitely getting closer to everybody else. This could be a very, very exciting race. I would actually call this a very cautious success, this whole thing, but what an upset. What an absolute upset. This is really good. And we're only talking about qualifying here. This is crazy. This is only going to bolster Lewis Hamilton's confidence. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being his 104th win, because I think Max is going to be very, very annoyed because he lost out, not just by, a few tenths, then, that's just the fault of the car, but by 0.003. To lose it by that little, that is going to be very galling for somebody who's been used to having consecutive pole after pole after pole after pole, and then not having that, and then Hamilton being the guy who does it, And then you got Lando right behind you. I think he might be in a little bit of a bad temper. So I'm really excited to see what happens, folks. Let me know what you think about this qualifying format thing in the comments, because I want to actually talk about this, because next weekend I'm actually going to be away on holiday. So I'm actually going to be missing it, the qualifying session. But I'm looking forward to this. I really am.